Hey, what's up? This is Mr. Ippolito, and I'm going to get you prepared for two different challenges back to back, the '05 challenge and then the '06 challenge, right? So just kind of scrolling through, we have one, two, three, four, and then five and six. This is basically the North and the South. I'm going to, we're kind of doing these together, but let me explain exactly what that's all about, and let me show you the next thing. So it's basically, this is part one. Let me just go ahead and jump to that right now. So instead of doing the mastery challenge on paper, this is going to be a digital mastery challenge, right? So in order to complete, you can see I've already started part of it for you on the north here, and I've done part of it for you here on the south. But in order to fill this out, you are going to watch two videos. There's one that's going to be on the north, and the other one that's going to be on the south. And so we're going to start first with the north. So let's get started. All right, so we begin with our study of the North. Now, when we speak about the North, very specifically, we are talking about those states leading up to the Civil War that are really in the Northeast, right? These were all the states that where slavery was not allowed. So you see all the states of New England, New York, Pennsylvania, and then you have those states that were kind of those frontier states, right? The old Northwest, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, and then Iowa. So these were, in 1850 anyway, these were the states of the North. And really by 1850, the only other state that was not a state that has allowed slavery was California. So way out over on the West Coast. So geographically, there was more land owned by the slave-owning states of the South than the North. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. And again, let me just show you really quickly one more time. We're going to go over all the categories. Let me show them to you. Hey, we're back. While I am teaching this to you, you're going to go ahead and fill this out. Now, the good news is I've already filled out the first category, geography. So you don't need to do anything else here for geography. When I start talking about population, I've done the first part of it for you. You're going to need to explain what this means. And then you got to do all the economy, technology, and culture, right? So I got things started for you. But once we get into population, then you're going to need to fill in that part, and then you got to do the rest, all right? So now let's go back to the presentation. And if you need to, pause this video intermittently so that you can take those notes. Because, again, what I'm looking for is you're going to give me the information, right? So you're going to put that down in your graphic organizer and then explain, like, what does this mean, the so what? And we'll talk about that, too, as we go along. So let's go ahead and continue. Okay, so that first category is geography. So in the North, they had rocky soil, they had small family farms, natural harbors, and fast-flowing rivers. So what does that mean exactly, right? Well, what that means is the geography of the North lent itself so that, first of all, with those natural harbors and fast-flowing rivers, that's going to enable ships to do what ships do. And what do ships do in the 1800s? They transport people, they transport cargo, right? They are used for shipping and for trade. And so the North, their economy is very much going to be based on shipping and trade and not, you'll notice here, rocky soil, small family farms. So the economy of the North is not going to be based on like this big plantation farming. It's going to be based on factories, as we'll learn about in a little while, and trade. Because they've got the harbors, they've got the rivers so that you can send stuff from one place to another. So that's how the geography of the North kind of impacts what they do and who they are and what their culture is. So we're going to get more into people and culture and economy and all that in just a moment. Now, typically, and you have seen something like this because you saw this video. Typically, this is when I would show these videos. You've already watched this because you've already learned about German and Irish immigration. So we're not going to watch this video again. We're not going to watch this video again, and we're not going to watch this one. We're just going to go right through. And so let's talk about population. Some of this is going to be a review of what you've already learned. The northern cities were growing, exponentially growing, right, during the early to mid 1800s. Most of the immigrants that were coming in, as you've already learned, were from Germany and Ireland. The Irish, as you know, were fleeing the Irish potato famine of the late 1800s and early 1850s. Those immigrants were coming over looking for work. Some settled in the northern cities because unskilled jobs were available. Again, that was mostly the Irish, but also some Germans as well. They did have trouble improving their working conditions because they were so easily replaced. There were so many immigrants coming into these cities that there was no such thing as workers' compensation or anything like workers' rights or minimum wage, or none of those existed back then for workers because workers were so plentiful. You just had so many people coming into the North that really factory owners, employers could kind of treat their workers however they wanted to because labor was so cheap back then. Many Americans hated the Irish. We've talked about this because they were willing to work for such low wages. And German immigrants, some of them lived in the cities, but some of them found farmland in the newly expanding frontier of America. So before we jump into, because I think our next topic is going to be the economy, before we jump into the economy, let's take a moment. Let's just go back here and let me just help you. I'm not going to do this every time, but let me just kind of help you with this here. So what does this mean? What does this mean that about what we were talking about with population? Well, first of all, this population was very heterogeneous. Heterogeneous means that you have lots of different kinds of people. You have the working classes, you have the middle class, you have an upper class in the North and in the cities. You have there is some agriculture, especially out in like Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin. Like there's some agriculture out there, but then there's also factory work in the northern cities in Boston and New York and Philadelphia. So there's a lot of different kinds of people, different types of ethnic groups, cultural groups, religious groups. In the North, it is very heterogeneous, which means lots of different kinds of people, right? So what this means is that there's great diversity in the North. And I think when we get to the Civil War, because this is what we're, antebellum America, we're getting closer and closer to the Civil War. I think what this means is that the North is going to have an advantage because of this heterogeneous population. Not only heterogeneous population, but also heterogeneous economy as well, and we'll get more into that when we talk about the economy. But they have so much going for them, so many different types of things that they're making and that they're growing. They have food crops that they're growing, again, mostly out in the western part of the North, right? Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin. Those are kind of the more agricultural states of the North. But there are just a lot of different kinds of people in the North. So very heterogeneous, a lot of diversity in the North. Okay, now let's get back to the actual presentation. All right. Again, feel free to pause whenever you need to. We're going to jump into the economy now. The rise of the factory system. So the Industrial Revolution, you may have heard this term, that started in the 1700s in England and in other parts of Europe, and then that kind of trickles over to the United States in the later 1700s, early 1800s. There is a wide variety of industries in that factory system of the North. Some of those factories, it's not even factories, some of that manufacturing is happening in people's homes. While other types of manufacturing is happening actually in like physical buildings that are factories, right? So the textile industry, if it's happening in homes, people are sewing clothing by hand in their homes. If it's happening in a factory, then they're using machines, right? Big machines, big textile machines to either weave cloth, to create fabric, or to turn that fabric into clothing or ship sails or something like that. So that's the textile industry. Any kind of fabric, whether it's being made, it's turned into shoes, like canvas shoes or ship sails or wool coat, whatever it is, that's all the textile industry. Artisans, like I mentioned before, were making things by hand in their own homes and selling them either to resellers or, selling them directly. And then, of course, shipping was also a big part of the economy of the North as well. So shippers in the North were actually going down to the South to get their cotton, their indigo, lumber, like all of the stuff that they were growing in the South, and ship it to places in the North, ship it to Europe. So the North, they were even making money off of the South because the South just didn't have the shipping structure in place to get their stuff anywhere else, right? So they were even needing to rely on the North because the North was so much better when it came to shipping, creating those ships, and operating a shipping industry. There were some downfalls of the factory system. Very few windows or heating systems. So really, really hot and stuffy in the summer and really cold in the winter. Dangerous machinery. Again, there's no such thing as workers' compensation insurance, and so you get a hand mangled in a machine, you're trying to like fix something and your hand gets mangled or it gets cut off or whatever. Sorry, I guess you can't work here anymore. Goodbye, good luck. There are no worker protections. Low pay, long hours, like I said, few worker protections. Workers were easily replaceable. Also, 1 in 6 children in the North had a job. This is interesting. We've talked earlier, you've learned about education in the North, right? Horace Mann, compulsory education. Well, education was becoming compulsory, meaning you had to do it in the North. However, there were some families who just said, you know what, my child is not going to get an education because, and it wasn't always necessarily very well enforced, especially with working class families. So 1 in every 6 children in the North had a job. Like this was as young as like 5 or 6 years old. I want to show you some photos. These are photos, some photos taken in the 1800s and some photos taken in the early 1900s. These are child workers. There's a video that I'm going to share in the some of the optional, you can do activities. The video is called Cotton Mill Girl, and it's all about the photography of Lewis Hine, who took these photos late 1800s, early 1900s. This is a child. I don't even know what that child is doing, but that kid's working, and that kid, 6, 7, 8 years old maybe. This is one of the famous photos of Lewis Hine. This girl is working in a textile mill. You can see right here the threads, right? This is they're making some sort of fabric, some sort of textiles, and she's got to be 10, 11, 12 years old. Again, another girl working in a cotton mill, a textile mill. This all would have been in New York or Massachusetts or Connecticut, one of those states of the North. Here's some kid, I'm assuming he's a coal miner maybe, and he's got to be about your age, 8th grade. But again, I say 8th grade, not going to school. This kid works for a living, right? And probably 13, 14 years old. Here's much younger working in, again, you see those spools of thread there. So this kid is working in a textile mill as well, and probably 5, 6, 7 years old. These kids, I want to say they're all coal miners. You can see from their dirty faces. And they're ranging in age from, we got some as young as maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, going all the way up to, we've got, I think, one adult there, but maybe some teenagers in the back here, but ranging in age from probably 8 to 18. So families needed money, and when families needed money, not only did the adults work, but the children worked as well. Another photo that I thought was interesting, this kid just like working in a textile mill barefoot, right? So again, this is either in New York or Massachusetts. So that idea of child labor as a source of income for families. So I want you to think for a moment, when the Civil War began, there were many Northerners who thought of the practice of slavery. We've talked about slavery already. We're going to talk about it some more as a barbaric and an inhumane practice. But there were some Southerners who were like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, you may think that we're barbaric and inhumane, but you Northerners, you Northern factory owners, you wealthy people in the North, you're putting children to work. You're putting, you have unsafe factories and unsafe labor conditions, and you work your workers long hours for low pay. And, if they get hurt on the job, then they're out of a job. So there were Southerners who said, well, at least my enslaved workers, I take care of them. I provide them with health care and with a home and with food. And so you can see how there might be this conflict here where one side, the North, is thinking that they're morally superior than the Southerners. And slavery was a horrible practice. But the Southerners are like, well, wait a minute, you're treating your workers pretty badly as well. So there was this kind of this friction, this conflict back and forth. All right. Let's keep going. I want to talk about technology. There were new inventions that were transforming northern factories and making those factories more efficient. There was the telegraph. You know about the telegraph because, here's why you know about the telegraph, because in the painting American Progress, we've talked about this. This is a telegraph line, right? It's the original text message. You send electrical impulses over a wire, and those electrical impulses stand for, there are dots and dashes that stand for letters, and you can send messages across long distances using the telegraph. So this was invented in the North in the 1800s as a more modern method of communication, because prior to the telegraph, the only other way that you could get a message to someone quickly was, you see the Pony Express rider right there. Write it down on paper, hand it to someone on a horse. Go, 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 go. So a telegraph is a much faster form of communication, the original text message. And then, of course, there's the sewing machine and the steam engine. So what does this all mean? Well, what this means is that the North is becoming much more technologically advanced than the South, right? They are investing in technology, in improving their infrastructure, in improving their communication, in making, sewing and transportation better, easier, faster, more efficient. And so the North is doing this, the South not so much. Speaking of transportation, roads, canals, and turnpikes, going to talk quickly about these. So, canals, I'll just quickly talk about canals first. So canals are like human-made rivers, right? They connect natural waterways from one to another. So this would be Lake Ontario, for example, one of the Great Lakes. And so the Erie Canal was one of those transportation inventions in the early 1800s that connected the Great Lakes, along with this other network of canals, to this is the Champlain River, which will become the Hudson River, which then flows out into New York Harbor and then into the Atlantic Ocean. So this system of canals is greatly going to improve the transportation system in the United States. Railroads, I wanted to show you really quickly. So this is this was the system of railroads. This just kind of shows you how advanced, technologically advanced in the area of transportation the North was getting. This is the system of railroads in the United States in 1834. And I think this. There's no sound on here. So this is fascinating. It's only, 46 seconds long. So you see it starts, and then over time, it tracks the growth of railroads. And of course, you can see there are some railroads down here in the South, of course, but where are most of those railroads being built, right? Most of those railroads are being built, that network of railroads. I'm going to pause right here because we just really want to talk about the time period leading up to the Civil War. There we go. So by 1857, you can see this vast network of railroads. There's Chicago right there. There's Detroit, Michigan, Indianapolis, Indiana, all of the different cities of Ohio, Eastern Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, all around New York. And then, of course, all in the New England states right here. There are some railroads here in the South, but far fewer, right? Far, far fewer. So this goes to show you how much more technologically advanced in terms of transportation the North was than the South, much more connected. Let's jump into culture. Public education, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because you've already learned about public education and the push to educate all children in the North. That was happening in the North, not so much in the South. Reform movements. There was this sense of Christian obligation. There was a movement called the Second Great Awakening in the North, which I think you're going to read about in the textbook, where basically there were a lot of Christians in the North who were like, we need to make life better. And so we need to abolish slavery and we need to abolish alcohol consumption. There's a push for women's rights, the rights of prisoners, and a movement to improve the treatment of the mentally ill. So a lot of small, tightly knit communities in the North because people live closer together. Right? In the North, people are your neighbors are closer by, so you feel a greater sense of community within your city, within your village, within your town than you might down in the South. And a lot of different religious beliefs, right? Again, speaking to that issue of heterogeneous versus homogeneous. Heterogeneous meaning just all different kinds of people, cultures, ethnicities, religious beliefs in the North, not as much of a diversity in the South. Okay, so, okay, and I think we're good. Yeah, because reform movements, that's more than we need to cover. So I think, we don't, oh my goodness, there's so much. Anyway, let me go ahead and get out of here. And I think you now have, because we talked about geography, population, economy, technology, and culture. So you have, if you want to watch that crash course video, you can. I'm going to throw it into the notes, but you have all of the resources you now need to be able to answer these 5 sections right here in the North. And then when you're all done with that, then go ahead and watch my other video on the South. And there you go. Of course, rewatch as needed to make sure you have all of this filled out. What was it? And then what does each of these mean? And then if you're still having trouble, then when I see you next, I can go ahead and help you out. Or you can get help from another student in class. All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.